Yuta Kotsu and Yuji Itadori are the two star boys of Jujutsu Kaisen, the two main characters of the series and Gojo's two sources of pride. But people like us, we don't really care about all that. In fact, forget all that. Let's see them fight to the death. So in today's video, let's do exactly that. What's up guys, Gamblrr here, and today, yeah, you saw the title and you saw the thumbnail. It's Yuta versus Yuji. Is it even close? Is it completely one-sided? Let's find out. Alright, enough of this yapping. Let's get straight into the video. To start the video off, I decided we go into Yuji since this is his first ever versus battle on the channel, so let's pay our respects to him. Going into strength, Yuji definitely came a long way. Yuji was of course always a physically gifted character in every sense of the word. Even as early as chapter 33, we find out that Yuji's base physical stats trump every student in the entire Goodwill event. Megumi, who hadn't even seen what Yuji could do at the moment, says that if it comes to a fight without curse energy, Yuji will win no matter what. This included Maki herself, a heavenly restriction user. Of course, she wasn't fully awakened, but she still had monstrous physical stats. In the same arc, we found out that Yuji's able to damage Hanami casually without any black flashes. Hanami is the most durable disaster curse spirit, with Gege directly comparing the stats to Jogo. In chapter 51, we see Hanami survive the complete onslaught of Yuji and Todo, with Todo even bringing out Playful Cloud on her. At the end of the chapter, Gege himself points out that if Jogo took all the hits Hanami did, he would have died instantly. And with that said, Yuji's casually able to damage her without any problem in the world. We fast forward over 150 chapters and Yuji just keeps evolving, losing to Choso, defeating Mahito, defeating Higurumu without curse energy. It's all fun and games until chapter 212, when Sukuna takes over Megumi's body. This was the beginning of the end of Jujutsu Kaisen, literally and figuratively. As soon as Yuji came back from getting punched by this Sukuna and saw Hana get tossed off a building like she was trash, Yuji entered a state of pure rage, attacking Sukuna with so much malice he wonders where the hell the strength he has at the moment came from. He starts destroying everything as he boxes with Sukuna and damages him after walking through his onslaught of dismantles. One thing to know is Sukuna's state. There's been arguments about whether or not Sukuna's entire being was nerfed to 10% by Megumi, or if it was just his curse energy output, and it's literally been 2 years. I think what it is that Megumi is holding back Sukuna's curse energy output, and that's why his dismantles were so weak. On the other hand, I don't think Megumi held back his physicals though, because the manner of which Sukuna is moving with him looking at his hand's ability to close and open makes me think that he was saying here that his curse energy output was cooked but not his physical capabilities. With that said, of course Sukuna may not have been expecting Yuji to actually be able to attack him, so I can't really say Yuji scales to 15 finger Sukuna's durability, but the fact that he damaged him still stands. But now we enter the good stuff, post time skip. The students and teachers alike all go through a time skip in order to prepare for and plan for killing Sukuna and Kenjaku. During this time skip, a ton of things change, but of course we'll get to the others in a second. What I want to focus on is Yuji's strength. Now this is kind of a tricky subject because throughout the entire raid, Yuji is attacking the barrier between Sukuna and Megumi's soul to weaken him. The thing of note from here is the fact that Yuji's base soul punches, as we refer to them, were so potent that they would reverse the effects of a black flash. Reminder that hitting a black flash boosts the potential you're fighting at, and in chapter 256, Sukuna hits 2 black flashes before Yuji hits him again. Then when Yuji hits him, Choso makes a statement that no matter how pumped up Sukuna gets hitting black flashes, Yuji will keep weakening him through his punches. This was kind of a weird part to go into because again, Yuji doesn't use physicals during the raid. He's not attacking Sukuna with just punch and kick. It's instead just targeting his soul. He also amps the tactic with black flashes, there's that, but you can't really put a number on it because claiming it's to the power of 2.5 is stupid. Gege was not in his right mind making that statement. I do have to get into his curse techniques though, Shrine and Blood Manipulation. Shrine was so weak in Yuji's hands, he needed to make direct contact with a pillar to break it, so that's a non-factor. Blood Manipulation on the other hand actually damages Sukuna a ton, but only in his strongest form, Supernova. One thing to note though is that his domain expansion is actually the Shrine attacking your soul. I guess people don't feel like reading the manga, but as soon as Nobara hit Sukuna with resonance, he got hit with a sure hit, and it was dismantled. With that said, I can't really yap about anything more, so let's get into speed. Yuji's speed is actually a weird topic to go into. I think I brought this up only once on the channel, but post time skip students are in a weird spot when it comes to speed. Before the time skip, Yuji was a fast boy. The guy was kind of matching a suppressed Maki, not holding her back but going a little bit slower than her. This is because Maki was the main one Sukuna was boxing while Yuji was left to the side. But you can also say it's because he was way more interested in Maki. I mean, she's literally the only one that gets him locked in, but take that as you will. After the time skip, things get a little tricky. At the end of chapter 245 and at the beginning of chapter 246, Sukuna shoots some dismantles at everyone, and to his surprise, the characters actually managed to survive it. Then after, he says he wants to see if everyone got faster, so he starts running and no one can keep up with him at all. Now here's the thing. This race happens, Sukuna takes Yuji out of the battle, then Higuruma, and Yuji comes back with reverse curse technique. Sukuna sees this and then he makes a very interesting comment. Looks like his ability to use curse energy to strengthen his body isn't the only thing that's improved. To go over it one more time so you can really understand what this means, Sukuna sees everyone's curse energy enhancements are stronger. He then races them, Yuji comes back with reverse curse technique, and then Sukuna comments that he guesses it wasn't only his curse energy enhancements that improved. This means that the guy never got faster throughout the time skip. This is a dumb thing in my opinion, but I guess Gege didn't feel like making them faster. Of course, this was before Yuji awakened, and even then we don't have a way to gauge if he got faster or not. Side note, there's actually a speed comparison between Yuta and Yuji directly that I won't go into until later, so stay tuned for that. For durability and endurance, we finally have a stat that we know directly got improved over the time skip. First off, even way before the time skip, Yuji was a durability monster. He was born with insane physicals, as I said before, and so combining it with curse energy gave him even more durability. There's also this cold statement that if it's just pain, Yuji will push through it. His endurance is something I respect even more than his durability. When he fights against Higuruma, and Higuruma of course comments on his durability, Yuji says that it's kind of his thing. My guy is an endurer, and it's all the more apparent after the time skip. First off, again, Sukuna comments on everyone's durability getting better, but then Yuji enters Yuta's domain expansion, and as Sukuna defends himself, he comments that both of their durability is somewhat comparable to Ryu is a character who met his end to a cleave, and cleave, mind you, is an attack that adjusts to your durability, making sure to kill you in one attack. This meant that, of course, in the state Sukuna was in, the only way he could kill them and land a lethal blow was to make direct contact with them. Yuji then goes on to fight like his life depends on it, taking cleaves, dismantles, punches, everything, and still goes on. Heck, Sukuna even notes that Yuji should have reached his limit a long time ago, but Yuji continues to attack head on and still being level-headed enough to land Divergent Fist on the king, killing him in the end. Before we get into the final stat for Yuji, I'd like to ask you to subscribe. I mean, you're this far in, I think we got something going on here. Let's get to 70k by the end of the year. Finally, getting into hacks, Yuji has a ton, but I briefly got into them already. Yuji first off has reverse curse technique and blood manipulation that allows him to attach limbs easier than others. We saw this firsthand during Sukuna's domain expansion. He lost his leg, but through blood manipulation, he reattached it and put it together with reverse curse technique. Speaking of blood manipulation, while Yuji's mastery isn't that great, he was still able to use piercing blood and supernova, two useful techniques, while definitely not his most potent. And speaking of not potent, we have Yuji's base shrine being able to make Sukuna bleed, but also being so weak he has to make direct contact with a pillar. I said base shrine because Yuji, through sharing a body with Sukuna, is now able to attack the soul, just as he did against Mahito. Against incarnated sorcerers, he's able to attack the barrier between them and the vessel they inhabit, and against regular sorcerers or cursed spirits, he's able to directly attack their soul. If you can't perceive your soul and can't use reverse curse technique, consider yourself fucked against Yuji. Eventually his attacks, whether it be punches or shrine, will take a toll on you. And finally, Yuji has a domain expansion which does the exact same thing to your soul using shrine. Oh yeah, and Yuji's a Black Flash fanatic. Once he's on a road, there's no stopping him. Alright though, I think we yapped enough about Yuji, and now it's time to get into Yuta Kotsu, the cursed student. Now, as you all probably know, there are actually about 2.5 Yuta forms. The first form is base Yuta without Rika completely, so this would just be Yuta with his sword and his pool of cursed energy, which is insanely large by the way. The second half will be Yuta with partially manifested Rika, which by the way can use domain expansion as well for some reason. And the second form is Yuta with Rika fully manifested, so it'd be Yuta with an entire arsenal of weapons, infinite cursed energy, and a full power Rika. So with that said, we'll go into each form and each of the stats, and during the versus battle, we'll have Yuji pull up to the gauntlet. So let's get into strength. Yuta in base is seen fighting a ton pre-time skip. The first is against Yuji. Yuji was surprisingly boxing well against Yuta, managing to break his sword, but Yuta's actual strikes still were heavy enough to stun Yuji. In the Senai colony, he was able to completely dominate the cockroach, sending him flying with almost everything he hit him with, and once he entered battle with Ryu, he was mildly able to box with him. I say mildly because Ryu doesn't really comment on his attack power, but rather his durability. Ryu was in control in hand-to-hand combat. Yuta with half manifested Rika however changed the entire playing field. Against Yuji, as soon as Yuji started to lock in, all Rika had to do was hold dude in place and Yuta was able to kill him. Also, like I said earlier, this version of Yuta can use his domain expansion, and he was going crazy. Inside of his domain expansion, he has access to infinite blades, and each of the blades inhabits a cursed technique that he's copied. The version of Yuta we'll be using for this video is him at his fullest power, so you have the following cursed techniques: Drew Shikigami, Cursed Speech, Shrine only one time, Future Sight, Sky Manipulation, and Jacob's Ladder. Jacob's Ladder was his sure hit, but that was to combat Sukuna. I don't know what he used against other sorcerers, but for this video, we'll keep it as Jacob's Ladder. Drew Shikigami are always a non-factor, Cursed Speech does what it needs to, Shrine is low-key fodder as well, and Jacob's Ladder isn't too impressive. I don't know if I'm bugging, but this Jacob's Ladder seemed way more potent despite Yuji's weakening. Oh yeah, also Yuta has Rika, a character who could throw around and send Sukuna flying. She also is basically immortal, but we know directly that you can take her down if she sustains enough damage. The final form of Yuta would be exactly what I said just now, but an even stronger Rika. This Rika would just do exactly what partially manifested Rika was able to do, but even better. Plus, she has access to blasts. These blasts are so potent that they're able to match with Ryu the highest output in the verse. And if they're stronger post time skip is up to you to decide. For speed, this doesn't really have to be split up in 3 categories. I talked about this earlier, but Sukuna made it clear that the guys didn't really get faster for some reason. And as soon as he's able to comment on it again during Yuta's domain, he doesn't. It's just durability. Yuta is still fast though. He's able to box with Sukuna, outpace Ryu in multiple occasions, and even outpace Naoya. This comes from this scene where Naoya decides to charge at Choso and Yuta ends up farther than he is in the initial attack. As for Rika, in her half manifested form, she's able to box alongside Yuta and Yuji and not hold them back in any shape or form. The exact same and even more can be said for fully manifested, as we've seen her literally fight alongside Yuta, jumping Uro and not holding back. Next up is durability and endurance, which I kind of went over already, but we'll still get into it because I like yapping. Yuta pre-time skip was taking blows that destroy entire areas and took Ryu's blast with his bare hands. Of course, Yuta didn't outright tank them, his hands got cooked by the blast, but he endured it and was able to use reverse curse technique. Post time skip, his durability along with Yuji was directly compared to Ryu, who again died to cleave, literal durability adjustment. Rika almost does the exact same thing as Yuta and her hand was able to withstand it. She does still get cooked by Sukuna's cleaves though, as everyone does, but something interesting that we saw was Ryu's ability to one-shot her. Ryu got cooked by the both of them, but as soon as he decided to punch back at Rika, she detransformed and Ryu one-shot her. And then the narrator tells us directly that the blow would have been difficult for her to deal with even if she was fully manifested. This just goes into what I said earlier about her being able to be taken down if she takes enough damage. And the final stat is hacks, and Yuta has a ton of them. He has reverse curse technique so potent that he's able to regenerate an entire limb. Rika fully manifested also has reverse curse technique and she's able to output it for minutes on end. This is of course because of her infinite curse energy supply that Yuta shares once they're fully manifested. Rika also has an inventory full of cursed tools, but we've only seen 2 in action and they were both gauntlet. I already went over the cursed techniques that Yuta has in his disposal and they all aid him tremendously when fighting opponents. Yuta overall is just super hacks and his entire thing is overwhelming the opponent with straight force. Heck, his entire plan against Sukuna was... Anyways, we've gotten to know both of our fighters, so now let's find out what would happen if they fought against each other rather than a common enemy. This fight will take place in the Cell Games arena. This is because I want to show you guys that I like Dragon Ball. Do you guys see it? Yeah, I like Dragon Ball, guys. Yuji's going to be at full power and he's going to have to work his way to the top of the Yuta gauntlet. Base Yuta, half manifested Yuta, and 5-minute Yuta. Same rules as always. Whoever dies or gets knocked out first loses. So let's go and simulate the fight. Play the Budokai music. Against base Yuta, the fight would start and Yuji would start boxing with him. Yuta knows of Yuji's ability to attack the soul, so his main focus would be to avoid those strikes, just like Sukuna was doing. However, in this state, Yuta has one thing and one thing only, a sword. It's bad enough that Yuji has reverse curse technique, but he has blood manipulation to reattach any limb that Yuta may cut off. Yuta would just get overwhelmed by Yuji's different tactics. He doesn't have to just focus on getting the soul dismantles or soul punches. He can spray blood all around if Yuta cuts his limb off and make it explode in his face. He can use supernova on his face. Damn, that doesn't even sound good either. You guys get what I'm saying. I also want to bring up the speed panel I was talking about earlier. In it, we see Yuji being able to match a domain app Yuta, given he does have his sword drawn, but you can see that Yuji is pretty fast. One thing I need to make clear as well is that Yuta likely can't perceive his soul, so by extension, he can't heal from the damage Yuji may sustain to it. If that's the case, I'm giving that win to Yuji, so he's moving on to the next round. Next is half manifested Yuta versus Yuji, and this one is way more competitive. We've actually seen this version of Yuta fight outside of his domain and he's still pretty strong. This tactic where he cloaks his movements with Rika and attacks through it can catch anyone off guard. It's even worse that Yuji doesn't have the ability to hold a sword like Sukuna does. This is where everything gets interesting. We can get through 2 scenarios here. Either Yuji uses domain expansion back or he uses simple domain. We'll of course go through both, but let's start with the domain clash. Yuji will be able to see that Yuta is about to use domain expansion through his spark of cursed energy. So in return he will use his own and then get utterly destroyed. First off, Yuji's domain was massive. It gives credence to the idea that his barrier technique and domain itself just wasn't refined in the slightest. Even beyond this ambiguous fact, Yuta has shown not 1 but 2 domain feats that put him above anything Yuji showcased, those being moving the domain coordinates and singling out Sukuna with a sure hit. This means that Yuta would just win the domain clash, so Yuji is just stuck without his curse technique. Now he's being charred by Jacob's ladder, stopped by cursed speech, and jumped by Yuta and Rika. Yeah, that's an instant loss. In the second scenario, Yuji uses simple domain and this might this might even be worse than the first one. I always talk about this, but I don't know why people gas this thing so much. With a simple domain, yes, you're able to fight the opponent, but it's only a matter of time before it breaks. You'd have to spam it like Gojo. The thing is, in this context, how the hell is this gonna help Yuji? If he's able to spam it like Gojo, which I completely doubt because Yuki couldn't do that, Yuji would have to run up to Yuta and damage him enough to break his domain. Yuji isn't doing that. He has Rika to deal with who can send him flying and hold him in place just like she did to Sukuna. And Yuta himself can use sky manipulation to just avoid Yuji's attacks. He'd get jumped and taken out the fight once again. That's a loss. And in the final round, it'd be the exact same thing but an even stronger Rika who can send blasts at Yuji and heal Yuta whenever she wants to. Imagine Yuta stop Yuji in place with cursed speech and Rika just decides to send a blast at him. That's too much of a slaughter to think about. Put the cursed fingers in the bag. In conclusion, Yuta absolutely slams Yuji. Yuji definitely went through an insane evolution through the story, but Yuta is just that guy. Simple as that. But what did you guys think? Definitely let me know in the comments. I love to hear from you guys. And I'll catch y'all in the next one.